I'm not usually a vlogger. I do not rant on the internet, but I think you made some pretty charged comments that require a response. Um, First, for example, you say that Beyonce is promulgating historical inaccuracies, that she is creating this false sense of achievement, and it's distracting women from the true goal, which should be to be working towards an egalitarian society. And I agree with you. I think we should be striving for one. But I also think that we have made great strides in pursuing it. For example, you have a college education yourself, and you're a woman. Did you know that most of the students in universities in industrialized countries are actually women? So we could say that they actually do run that in a narrow sense. Um, you say, for example, also that women dominate, the women are dominated across the world. And I don't know, you ask us to look up everything that you say, and in fact, it turns out not to be the case. Anthropology and history have shown us many examples of societies in which women have very prominent roles. But I'm not gonna flip your argument on its head because I think, to begin with, it's a little misleading. Power cannot be construed in terms of a dominator and a dominated in most societies other than the post-industrial United States, and it's academically inaccurate to project everything that is true about the United States into other cultures. Um, you say, for example, that that we shouldn't be talking about women's issues. We should be just talking about issues. Well, the thing is that you're coming from a very specific theoretical lens, given, for example, your book recommendations. And I think that it is a lens that is based on the idea that you can just take men and women and turn them into separate groups and pit them against each other in this kind of a relationship. And this is kind of misleading because there are many cultures which have one kind of power assigned to men, for example, making decisions politically or publicly, and women are in charge of taking a more private aspect of power, which is power nonetheless. There are societies which are matriarchal, for example, in which women are the ones that determine family hierarchy and that protect it. There are societies which are patriarchal, but in which women make important decisions. And I think we should make a distinction between those societies and the United States. There are societies, for example, like historically, Jewish culture has been matriarchal because it traces family line back to women, yet it is patriarchal in the sense that men are the ones who make the decision. There are cultures in places like Papua New Guinea, for example, like the Arapish, in which women were the ones who were in charge of hunting and providing for the family, and they were running that culture, so to speak. And if it's the way that you want to look at it, if you choose to see that men's roles are basically worthless, um, you say also, for example, that 90% of the victims of rape and 95% of victims of domestic abuse are women. Um, but like I said, you're talking about a specific society, you're talking about a specific place. Um, but in other places around the world, it's not just about the domination of men and women. It's also about capitalism, for example. In many places like India and China, in which you have you mentioned feminicide and infanticide, and abortion of women. Well, in these places, actually, this happens because people in those countries perceive that male offspring will be better able to produce economically because the countries that dominate the global economy are sexist themselves. So it's a vicious cycle. It doesn't mean that they truly despise women, but it means that the economy is structured in such a way across the world, and this is changing. Um, in places like Sweden and Uganda, women are making significant strides. They run the parliament, for example. So they do run some things, which is not where we should be, but it's definitely a heck of a lot better than it was before. Um, there are many companies that are run by women, and what we notice is that as countries develop, as economies become more prosperous, but also more egalitarian, domestic violence against women, for example, diminishes. As education becomes more prevalent, women are less abused. And so we have to be conscious of that. That it's not just about gender and domination. It's also about capitalism. It's also about politics, and we cannot dissociate one thing from the other. You and speaking of that, you mentioned the fact that cockfighting is a crime in some states, whereas and I mean a major crime like a felony, whereas domestic abuse is not. Well, I think this is a very vicious strategy of looking at things. Why are you pitting people against animal rights in favor of feminism? Why are you exalting your own cause in diminishment of another. I think I personally think both things should be felonies, but I also think that we cannot, ridicule cockfighting as simply, making chicken peck against each other. It's a sport of violence, and it's a sport, and it's cruel to animals who have a sentience and who deserve consideration, just like men, just like women. Um, then you go and point out that women make 78 cents on the dollar, related to men in the United States. And you go on to point out yourself that it's a heck of a lot better than it used to be in 1980. And I think this is very, very important, because the trend continues to be that way. Like I said, women are most of the educated people in industrialized countries today, and I think it shouldn't surprise us is if we see those playing fields level up. For certain groups, for example, for African American women, they are making more than the men, and that's just a fact. It is improving, and we need to be working, and people are working. I don't think there it's a zero sum game in which we shouldn't be celebrating because we have to be fighting all the time. There's, for example, a class action lawsuit that is basically pinning Walmart against the wall and making an example of it because of discrimination in salaries against their female employees. And I think more corporations are going to become more responsible as we go along. So women are making great, great strides. And I think, for example, you say that women, that they are dominated structurally, in a sense that they are objectified and their sexuality is commodified. Well, I think are you willingly choosing to ignore the fact that women have Cosmo, but men have GQ, and they have details, and they also are seeing their sexuality more commodified, more commodified. I mean, look at the video. Look at the Girls Who Run the World video. There's a bunch of naked men, hot dudes dancing behind Beyonce, because male sexuality is also objectified in our culture, and we have to accept this. We have to accept that there are two sides to every story. Um, I think in the end, my point is that women are making great strides. We should definitely be praising. We have to celebrate. We should be thankful that there are Beyonces around the world, that there's powerful bitches. Yes, it's empowerment. It's empowering. It can be empowering depending on how you look at it. That they are making women feel proud about who they are. We have to recognize and celebrate it. We have to be able to see how far we have come so that we can know where we want to go.